Hi, my name's Aveline, and I used to think being the quiet one meant being the safe one. My sister, Valora, sold the necklace our mother left for both of us and told a jewelry store I was a thief. Said, "This place doesn't sell cheap stuff." Loud enough for strangers to laugh. But that wasn't the worst part. She'd already rewritten our family story, cut me out of the will, deleted my name from our company's records, and claimed the heirlooms like they were hers all along. And when her billionaire husband bought that same necklace, $12 million in cash, and put it around my neck, no one had words. But I still do. Want to know what really happened, and how far some people will go to erase their own blood? I arrived just before the lunch crowd began clogging Rodeo Drive, when the sidewalks still shimmered under the lazy California sun and the boutique's windows gleamed like they hadn't been touched by real people in years. De la Vigne. The name was etched in gold cursive across the glass, same as it had been when my mother would glance at it with quiet reverence. She never stepped inside, said it wasn't a place for women like her. That day, I didn't feel much different. The velvet pouch in my purse wasn't fancy. The drawstring was frayed, and the color had faded, but I had kept it intact all these years. Inside was a necklace, rose gold, light as breath, with a tiny charm shaped like a magnolia bud, our mother's favorite flower. She gave it to us. Not to me, not to Valora, to us. I didn't come to cause trouble. I came to ask for restoration. A simple polish, maybe a new clasp. Just something to make it whole again. Some people wear grief. I carried mine in canvas and cotton, and soft, almost forgotten things. The woman behind the counter didn't look up when I approached. She had that crisp demeanor unique to women who believed the value of a person could be measured by the stitching of their handbag. "Yes?" she asked flatly. "I wanted to ask about restoring this," I said, setting the pouch on the counter. She opened it casually, the way you might expect someone to inspect a returned item from clearance. But then she paused, fingers tightening slightly around the chain. She looked closer, furrowed her brow, then tapped something into her screen. After a moment, she glanced at me, longer this time, almost reassessing. "This item was sold to us 2 months ago by a Mrs. Valora Greaves," she said slowly. "Are you trying to repurchase it?" I blinked, not immediately understanding. "I'm sorry?" I asked. "This necklace," she repeated, lifting it gently. "It came in with other estate pieces, very particular provenance. You're not authorized to request alterations." I stared at her, trying to make the words make sense. Valora had sold it. I reached for the necklace, almost instinctively. On the underside of the clasp, barely visible unless you knew where to look, were the initials M.M., Marion Madsen, our mother. "I didn't come here to buy anything," I managed to say. "This belonged to my mother. She gave it to both of us." The clerk offered a small, tight smile. "Well, I suppose your sister didn't see it that way." She placed it back into the pouch and set it aside, just out of my reach. "I'll have to ask my manager how to proceed. If you'll step aside for a moment, please." So I did. I stepped back into a space that didn't want me. I waited by the entrance, pretending to check my phone, fingers numb. I shouldn't have been surprised. Valora always did have a way of turning ours into mine. I didn't notice the doors open behind me until I heard the click of heels. Deliberate, sharp. The kind of click that makes heads turn because it's supposed to. She was dressed in white, clean, crisp, expensive. Her sunglasses slid down just enough to reveal eyes that scanned the boutique like she owned it. Technically, she did not. Emotionally? That was another matter. "Didn't expect to see you here," Valora said, lips barely curling into what passed for a smile. For a half second, I forgot the last 3 years of silence and thought she might hug me. Then I saw her eyes, glassy, detached, like she didn't recognize me, or worse, like she did, and wished she didn't. I nodded slowly. "Just came to ask about something Mom left behind." She cocked her head. "Oh, that old thing?" she said, eyes flicking toward the counter. You can't just walk in here like it's a thrift store. This isn't Pasadena. The words landed louder than they were spoken. A few nearby customers glanced over, mildly entertained. Her tone wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. She turned and gave a subtle nod to the staff, as if to signal that I didn't belong. And in that moment, I felt it. The real difference between us. It wasn't the clothes, or the car she parked out front. It was how easily she could erase someone without even raising her voice. "Why did you sell it?" I asked. Valora didn't flinch. "It didn't suit me. It was old," she said with a shrug. "Like a lot of things we should leave behind." There was no malice in her voice. That would have at least made her human. This was worse. This was administrative. The boutique manager approached her with a soft smile. "Mrs. Greaves," he said warmly, "the suite is ready whenever you are." She turned to follow, tossing a glance over her shoulder. "You should really call before showing up places, Aveline. It's not considerate." I watched her disappear into the private section, heels still clicking like punctuation marks. I didn't follow. Instead, I sat down on the small bench by the entry, beside a display of luxury leather wallets I couldn't afford and didn't want. I thought of our mother, how she used to trace her fingers across that magnolia charm and say, "Nothing worth keeping ever truly leaves." But here I was. And it had. If memory had weight, she just dropped the heaviest silence on my chest. I stood from the bench, pulled my coat tighter, and walked toward the counter again. Not because I wanted to, but because I refused to let her have the final word in that moment. My fingers brushed the pouch still lying near the clerk's elbow. She flinched slightly, as if I might snatch it and run. "Can I speak to your manager?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She glanced toward the back, then wordlessly disappeared behind a frosted glass door. A minute later, a man emerged. Tall, polished, and carrying a smile he clearly practiced more in mirrors than in conversation. "Ms. Baird?" he said, his voice courteous but distant. "I understand there's been some confusion regarding the necklace?" "Yes. I brought it in to ask about restoration, but I was just told it was sold here by someone I know. It belonged to my mother." He nodded, glancing at the tablet in his hand. "I see. Do you mind if I confirm a few details?" "Please," I said. He tapped a few times, squinting. Then his mouth tightened ever so slightly. That's odd. It appears your name is already in our system." I waited, unsure if that was good or bad. "However," he continued, hesitating now, "there's a flag on your profile. It says you're on a restricted client list." I blinked, trying to process. "A restricted list? For what?" He adjusted the tablet, turned it slightly my way, not fully, just enough. There it was, in bold text under my name. "Client flagged for disruptive behavior. Zhou Xiao, 14, 2019 authorization, entered by V. Greaves Valora." I stared at the screen, then back at him. "Disruptive behavior?" He cleared his throat. "We don't usually disclose internal notes, but since this is clearly a misunderstanding." "I want a copy of that," I interrupted, sharper than intended. "I'm afraid I can't give you a printout, but I can assure you it won't affect future visits if we—" "She didn't just erase me," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "She turned my name into a warning." The man looked uncomfortable. "Would you like to see the necklace again?" "No," I said, stepping back. "I think I've seen everything I need to." I left the side counter, walking slowly back toward the main floor. The boutique had grown busier. Clients fluttered between display cases, laughing over glasses of sparkling water, draped in silks and curated confidence. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was somewhere colder than that, an old ache that finally had a name. As I approached the central showcase, the necklace was back in its place, displayed under perfect lighting, positioned to seduce. I took one step forward. "Excuse me," a young associate said, stepping in front of me. "That piece is reserved." I looked at her calmly. "I'm not here to touch it. I just wanted to see it again." She shifted uncomfortably. It's reserved for certain guests. A woman nearby, mid-50s, flawless skin, draped in emeralds, let out a soft, theatrical chuckle. God, she really thought she could touch that, she whispered to her friend, loud enough for me to hear. I didn't respond. I simply turned back toward the exit. But then Valora's voice, cutting, clean, and calibrated, rose just above the ambient hum of classical music. This place doesn't sell cheap stuff. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The words dropped into the silence like a coin in an empty room. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The damage wasn't in the words. It was in the fact that no one disagreed. I slowly adjusted my coat again, lifting the collar. I turned toward the exit. One more step and I'd be out of her theater. Then came the whisper, low and wet with implication, from behind the counter. She's probably casing the place. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, not because I was afraid, but because I recognized what was happening. I was being reframed, a thief. Valora's greatest talent had never been cruelty. It was narrative control. She knew how to build a version of you others would believe faster than they'd bother asking you to explain. I turned, just slightly, and saw the clerk who'd whispered now, pretending to polish a watch band. Another nodded, subtle as fog. Their posture said more than words ever could. No one in that boutique saw me anymore. Not really. I was already labeled, already coded, already processed. My mother once told me silence came in two forms, grace or surrender. That day, mine was neither. It was a note, sharp, mental, filed away. I left without a word. But they hadn't watched me leave. They'd watched me stay, quietly, in their memory, like a fuse that hadn't burned out yet. By the time I got home, the sun had already dipped behind the mountains, leaving Pasadena wrapped in the kind of golden quiet that always made the air feel heavier. I slipped off my shoes and let my coat fall over the back of a chair, not bothering to hang it. My purse hit the entryway table with a soft thud. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to see the room to know where everything was. I walked straight to the hallway closet, pulled down the navy blue storage box labeled in Sharpie, Miskel, old stuff, and carried it to the kitchen table. My hands moved on muscle memory as I opened it. A few greeting cards from birthdays no one remembered anymore. A faded Polaroid of me and Valora in matching Easter dresses. A ribbon from a piano recital I barely practiced for. And then I saw it. A folded sheet of printer paper, creased 3 times, edges slightly curled from being opened too many times over the years. I didn't need to unfold it to know what it was. I had written it. Every word. I'm sorry if my presence was a distraction. I only wanted to support you. I read it aloud, quietly, like a line from a play I'd never gotten to finish. It was the email I had sent Valora 5 years ago after she'd uninvited me, publicly, from the launch of her flagship boutique. Back then, I told myself she was under pressure, that she didn't mean to humiliate me in front of mutual friends. I convinced myself that if I apologized, if I took the blame, maybe we could reset. Because that's what people do in families, right? They find ways to stay in orbit, even if it means shrinking themselves. But now I understood. That apology hadn't closed any wounds. It had become evidence, used to justify her narrative that I was emotionally disruptive, used to validate a blacklist that followed me into the very boutique she once begged me to help her build. She hadn't just framed me, she'd used my own frame. I pushed the letter aside and opened my laptop. It hummed to life, the screen glowing against the dim room. Out of habit, I clicked open Instagram. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or the need to punish myself with one more layer of curated fiction. There she was. Valora, front and center on her profile, in a photo from her first boutique event. The caption read, "Built it, paid for it, deserved it." Over 1,200 likes, dozens of comments. Such a powerful solo moment. You've always been self-made, V. But I remembered that day. I had been standing right next to her in that picture. I helped manage catering. I handed out the gift bags. I stayed after to help clean up while she left early for a dinner with investors. I zoomed in on the photo. The angle had changed slightly. The lighting was cropped just so. But it was the same backdrop, same stage, same white dress with the silver brooch. And I was gone, cropped out like I never existed. I opened my local folder, one of those private ones no one but me ever saw. There it was, the original, uncropped version. Me and Valora side by side, her hand resting on my shoulder. I had smiled too wide. She had done that thing with her eyes, where she smirked more than she smiled. And now she'd rewritten it. I stared at the two photos side by side. One version posted for the world, the other saved in my folder, unseen, unclaimed. It wasn't just about a necklace or a blacklist. It was about narrative, about who gets to tell the story, who gets to exist in it. She had decided that her version of events was more palatable without me in the frame. But I remembered being there. And I had proof. I uploaded the original image to a private cloud drive, created a folder, labeled it, record of what actually happened. Then I sat in silence. I didn't feel vindicated or angry, just real. Like someone who had finally accepted that sometimes people don't just move on. They make sure the door is locked behind them. I thought about the years I'd spent second-guessing myself, about the time I swallowed my voice to keep the peace, about how every attempt to reconnect had ended with me apologizing for wanting basic decency. I wasn't removed because I didn't belong. I was removed because my presence was too true. And that kind of truth? It unsettles people who live inside their own polished version of things. If she could crop me from the past, what would she do to control the future? The next afternoon, I stood across the street from the boutique, my coffee going cold in my hand, as I watched the valets scramble to park a parade of imported cars. De la Vigne always looked like a set piece for someone else's story. Polished, aloof, and just detached enough from reality to make you question your own. I didn't plan to go inside again so soon, but sometimes silence leaves a taste in your mouth that only truth can rinse out. I walked in slowly, deliberately. The same soft lighting bathed the display cases. The same curated scent lingered in the air, roses and cedar, and something sharper beneath, like ambition masked in perfume. This time, no one greeted me. I approached the center showcase, where the necklace still sat. I didn't reach for it. I just looked. Up close, the charm didn't sparkle so much as it performed. I leaned forward slightly, tracing the chain with my eyes, stopping at the clasp. I needed to know. There had been an engraving once, something small, almost imperceptible, unless you were looking for it. "Can I help you, ma'am?" The same associate from the other day had reappeared, her tone still rehearsed, but thinner now, almost wary. "Yes," I said softly. "I was hoping to see the underside of the necklace. I believe there used to be something engraved." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I can check with our backroom staff. Please wait here." As she disappeared, I became aware of voices entering the boutique. Familiar, forced, and far too loud for a place like this. Valora. She was dressed in a deep emerald jumpsuit today, her hair slicked back into that unforgiving bun that always made her look taller. She didn't see me right away. She was mid-laugh with another woman, someone I didn't recognize, mid-40s, dripping with diamonds and Botox confidence. Then Valora's eyes landed on me. For a second, her smile twitched. Just slightly. Then she leaned toward the woman next to her, lowered her voice. But not enough. "Be careful," she said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "She used to steal little things as a kid. You never really know with her." It didn't matter that the words were framed like a joke. It didn't matter that they were said with a half smile. The damage was already airborne. The boutique froze. A man browsing cufflinks glanced up. The woman with Valora looked startled, then giggled nervously, like someone unsure whether they were being invited to laugh or warned not to. I didn't move, not right away. The associate returned, avoiding eye contact now. Our back technician can show you the necklace. Follow me, please. We stepped into a small, quiet room in the back, part storage, part workspace. A young man with gloved hands held the necklace under a magnifying lens. The light hit just right. I leaned in. There, beneath the clasp, was a rectangular patch. Smooth. Too smooth. Something had been scrubbed off. It wasn't rough or clumsy. It was methodical, professional, the kind of erasure that took time and intention. I didn't need a microscope to remember what used to be there. It had read, "For my daughters, M.M. Marion Madsen, our mother. She had the engraving done just after Dad passed, said it was her way of reminding us we still had each other, even when the family felt smaller. Valora had it removed." I straightened up, nodded to the technician, and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't ask what I was looking for. As I walked back through the boutique toward the front, I passed Valora again. This time, she met my eyes. "What did you think you'd find back there?" she asked, voice casual, almost teasing. "I didn't think. I knew," I replied calmly. "You didn't just rewrite history. You cleaned it with acid." She blinked, caught off guard for half a second, then recovered. "Oh, come on. It's just a necklace." "No," I said, still walking. "It was a receipt, and you burned it." I left before she could answer. Outside, the sky had turned that pale gray that warned of late afternoon drizzle. I didn't have an umbrella, but I didn't rush. I needed the walk, needed to feel the pavement under my feet, the air on my face. I needed something real, something unsanitized by chandeliers and curated shame. Because here's what I knew. Every insult sounds more reasonable in a velvet room. Every lie smells more expensive in a store with chandeliers. And every bystander in that boutique, every clerk, every client, every passive nod, wasn't just watching. They were participating. Not one person said, "That's not okay." Not one asked, "Is that true?" They didn't have to. Their silence did the heavy lifting. I didn't scream. I didn't break. But she should have known. Quiet isn't always permission. I lingered near the hallway exit, phone in hand, pretending to scroll, while my mind replayed every word Valora had said, like static in a radio. I wasn't texting. I wasn't checking email. I just needed something to hold, something that kept me from curling my fingers into fists. From the corner of my eye, I saw her, Isolde. She was maybe 23, 24 at most. One of the newer hires, always polite but careful not to be too visible. That day, her eyes moved like she was scanning for cameras, rather than customers. She passed close, just enough to slip a folded paper into my hand. I opened it without drama. Inside, in neat, nervous handwriting, were 7 words. I saw what she changed. You weren't wrong. Isolde didn't stop walking. She kept her voice low, barely audible. "I'd help more," she murmured, "but I'm on probation here. I could lose everything." I didn't say anything. I just nodded once. And that was enough. It hit me then, not just what Valora had done, but how she had trained the room around her. Everyone here had been taught not just to serve her, but to protect her. Not through affection, through silence, through fear. It wasn't just money that bought her power. It was pressure, leveraged like interest, subtle and constant. No one said no to Valora because they didn't want to lose the small space they were allowed to occupy. I stepped out of the boutique into a sky that was thick with clouds and felt heavier than it should have. I didn't have an umbrella, but I didn't care. My legs moved on memory as I walked toward the bus stop, the kind of walk where the world falls quiet except for your own breathing and the slow rise of clarity. By the time I got home, I'd already made a decision. But before I acted, I let myself remember something. 2 years ago, right after our mother's funeral, I'd returned to the old house, not for furniture or jewelry or even photos. I just wanted a few of Mom's books. There was this tattered hardcover of To Kill a Mockingbird that still had her notes in the margins. That was what I came for. Valora answered the door. She was already in athleisure and full makeup, her version of casual mourning. She held a mug with the words, "Let's build empires," printed in gold. "You don't have to knock," she said, "but since you're here, we should talk." I stepped inside. Everything smelled new. Too new. The kind of new that meant something had been sanitized. "I sold the house," she said, setting the mug down. "It doesn't make sense for it to just sit here. Besides, it's not like you could have afforded the property taxes." The words were smooth, like she'd rehearsed them. I blinked. "You sold it?" "It's done," she replied. "The buyers close next week." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I nodded. I walked past her and went to Mom's study. Half the books were already boxed up. She didn't change the locks. She changed the deed. She didn't just move on. She bulldozed the version of the past where we both mattered. I should have said it then. Should have looked her dead in the eye and said, "If you could evict a memory, you would." But I didn't. I packed the book. I left. No goodbye, no confrontation. Just that aching, familiar silence. But this time would be different. Back in my apartment, I turned on the lamp in the corner, the one Mom gave me when I moved out. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh notebook and wrote one line in black ink. This time, I will not stay quiet. I reached into the bottom drawer, pulled out the folder I had kept all these years. It had no label, no decoration. Inside were documents Valora hoped I'd forgotten. Emails, photos, receipts, and that picture, the picture, from her first store launch. The one where I stood beside her before she cropped me out. I scanned it again, saved it as a PDF, attached it to an email address to one person, Maelis Trent. No subject line, just the image. Maelis was a journalist, independent, sharp, and most importantly, unafraid of uncomfortable stories. Years ago, I helped her vet a source for a piece on wage theft in luxury retail. We hadn't spoken in some time, but I knew she'd remember me. I hovered over the send button. I thought about the whispers, the receipt in my hand, the house that no longer had our mother's laughter in its walls, the necklace that had once symbolized love, now buried under lies and polish. I pressed send, and just like that, something shifted inside me. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't interested in public drama. But I wasn't going to pretend anymore that silence meant peace. Some people mistake your quiet as permission. Others use it as proof you never mattered. Valora had done both. The next morning, light filtered through my apartment blinds like it was trying not to disturb me. But my phone had already done that. It buzzed twice, then again. Then once more. I rolled over, grabbed it, expecting nothing more than some work email or maybe a subscription notice I'd forgotten to cancel. But the subject lines were different this time. "Is this you? You need to see this." "Wait, she's your sister?" I rubbed my eyes, sat up, and tapped the first message. It wasn't long, just a link and a screenshot from a TikTok clip. My heart didn't drop exactly, it slowed. My thumb hovered for a second before I pressed play. There we were. Me, standing like a statue inside De La Vigne. The necklace glimmered behind the glass. My posture said everything, shoulders slightly hunched, face too still. Valora's voice came through, clear and sharp like she'd been mic'd. "This place doesn't sell cheap stuff." The camera panned to me just in time to capture my expression. Blank, unreadable. I hadn't realized someone had been filming, but of course they had. There are always phones, always watchers. The caption read, "Rich woman humiliates sister over 12 Mallar's necklace. Family fail. De La Vigne drama." My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from something slower and deeper. I scrolled down to the comments. "She didn't even say anything. That's the kind of pain you recognize. Can't believe blood did that to blood. Silent type always gets stepped on until they snap. She'll come back swinging." This isn't luxury, it's cruelty in cashmere. I refreshed the page. Over 800,000 views, 26,000 likes, thousands of comments, some supportive, some cruel, some just watching for the entertainment. The video had gone viral overnight. And not because I'd done anything, but because I hadn't. Because I hadn't defended myself. Because I stood there and let Valora's words land like slaps in a boutique full of bystanders with expensive sunglasses and silent mouths. They didn't film my pain, but they shared it anyway. I put the phone down, got up, and made myself coffee with shaking hands. The machine sputtered louder than usual. My reflection in the microwave door looked tired, but there was something else there now, something more alert. I sipped slowly, then walked to the kitchen table where my old folder still lay open from the night before. Pages half pulled, images scattered. I shuffled them back into order with care, pausing at the photo of us. The photo. The one where I hadn't been erased. I wasn't going to let her write the ending. Across town, in a boutique security office tucked behind a mirrored wall, a different kind of story had played out the night before. I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I'd been told enough since. Valora, in her usual posturing, had sent a Slack message to the boutique's private channel. I saw the screenshot later. Flag her name, no re-entry. Any footage, private, no statements. No statements. Boutique policy was clear. Avoid press, avoid scandal. But not because they cared about truth. They cared about narrative, about control. Valora didn't want me out because I caused trouble. She wanted me out because I disrupted her version of the story. I was told a staffer, maybe Isolde, maybe someone else, had tried to push back, even if quietly. That's when the manager stepped in. Don't engage. If she pushes, we have incident notes from 2019. Old lies, reused like wallpaper. Convenient, easy to peel and stick when needed. She's unstable, someone else had typed. Best to let her fade. Fade. I sat back down at my desk, refreshed the video again. Nearly 1 million views now. The comments scrolled faster than I could read. Then, I saw one that stopped me, cold. There's more to this story. Someone better tell it before she's edited out again. Edited out again. I opened the folder on my desktop, record of what actually happened. Clicked through the files. I had images, screenshots, emails, the receipt, the original photo, the gift letter from our mother. All of it. It had sat there for years, waiting for something I hadn't even realized I was building toward. I selected the files, created a Dropbox link, watched the bar crawl toward 100%. Then I copied the link into a new email. But I didn't send it, not yet. They wanted me silent. Now they were afraid of what I might say. She banned me from her store, but not from her story. I stared at the blank screen for a moment after saving the Dropbox link, my finger still hovering over the trackpad. The cursor blinked steadily, like it was daring me to hit send. But instead, I closed the laptop and slid it aside. Something told me I wasn't done, not yet. There was more to remember, and it was time I finally faced it. I pulled a manila envelope from the bottom drawer of the credenza by the window. It had been there for 2 years, untouched. The label in the corner still bore the name of my mother's attorney, printed in a formal serif font that somehow always made me feel like a child being summoned to the principal's office. I hadn't opened it when it arrived. Back then, I told myself I didn't need what was inside, that I wanted peace more than closure, that nothing in that envelope could change what I'd already lost. But now, with the storm Valora had stirred, and the digital crowd still howling outside my door, I knew the truth. My avoidance had been protection, and protection wasn't the same as healing. I peeled the flap open slowly and slid out the documents. The first few pages were boilerplate, death certificate, estate tax forms. Then came the will. At the top of the draft, in our mother's delicate script, were both our names, Aveline and Valora. Equal, side by side. But as I kept reading, I saw it. The revision date. 1 week before she passed. The final notarized copy, clean and cold, listed only one heir, Valora Madsen. My name was gone. No explanation, no footnote, just gone. A sharp exhale escaped me, though I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. I flipped back to the original draft, reread it to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't. She had removed me legally while I was sitting at her bedside, updating her pain med schedule and calling the insurance company for the 5th time that week. It wasn't just about money. It was about narrative, about who deserved to hold the family name, about who got to inherit history, not just the house or the jewelry, but the story of who we were. And Valora had decided it wasn't me. I sat with the papers in my lap for a long while, letting the weight of the pages press down on my knees. Then I got up and poured myself a glass of water, pacing the length of the living room like I used to when I was cramming for finals. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up and opened Instagram, half on autopilot. There it was. A new post from Valora. A close-up shot of the necklace. The one with the rose gold intertwined rings our mother had given us at that brunch 3 years ago. The caption read, "Callum gave me this when I opened my first boutique. He said it reminded him of how far we'd come." There was even a heart emoji. I zoomed in. The design was unmistakable. I knew every curve of that necklace. I had touched it the morning of the brunch when Mom called us over with a little box and said, "For both of you, because I'm proud of both of you, and because I want you to remember, this is shared." But Valora had taken it, and within minutes of that gift being unwrapped, told the rest of the table it was from Callum. I'd let it slide then. I didn't want to embarrass her, didn't want to ruin the moment. I had thought it didn't matter who got credit, but now I saw it clearly. This wasn't just theft, it was rebranding. She had taken the object, rewritten its origin, and used it as a prop in the glossy storyline of her curated life. That necklace was supposed to be a bridge between us, and she had paved over it with lies and filters. I reopened my laptop. The Dropbox link was still there. I clicked New Email and typed out a subject line, "Not just a necklace." In the body of the email, I attached a photo of the original necklace taken at that brunch, the original draft of the will with both our names, a screenshot of Valora's new Instagram post, a copy of the gift letter Mom had written in her own hand. I addressed it to Malis Trent, the journalist. Then I wrote, just below the attachments, "She turned inheritance into image, but she forgot that stories carry receipts too." I stared at the screen a moment longer, then hit send. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt accurate. Valora had spent years collecting things and erasing context. She didn't want family. She wanted an origin myth, one where she rose alone, struggled alone, triumphed alone. But I'd been there the whole time. I held the proof. She repackaged what was ours into what was hers. Let's see how well it sells when the truth is back in stock. The morning I returned to De La Vigne, the sky was overcast. Not stormy, just uncertain. Like the weather couldn't make up its mind. I didn't dress up. I didn't curl my hair. I didn't wear anything that sparkled or shouted. Just black slacks, a clean blouse, and my mother's old watch. It hadn't worked in years, but I wore it anyway. Not for time, but for memory. When I pushed through the boutique doors, the first thing I noticed was the shift in temperature. Not physical, but human. Last time, they barely saw me. This time, they all saw me. And they were careful. The woman at the reception desk offered me water with too many ma'ams. The manager who once avoided eye contact now said my name with over-enunciated warmth, like he was trying to erase something by overcorrecting. "We're glad to have you back, Ms. Baird," he said, folding his hands like a waiter, trying to earn back a lost tip. "Would you like to browse the—" "No," I said gently. "I'll wait." And I did. A few minutes later, she arrived. Valora. She walked in like nothing had happened, like the internet hadn't dissected her for 2 days straight, like her version of the story hadn't unraveled in 1,000 retweets and video stitches. She wore white again. She always wore white when she wanted to seem untouched. She brought 2 influencers with her this time, women I recognized from her social circle, all teeth and heels and curated femininity. They laughed too loud, overcompensating, always a tell. Our eyes met, She didn't speak, not to me, but her smile dipped a fraction, just enough to say, "You don't control this room." And then the boutique doors opened again. No chime, no announcement, just presence. Callum walked in without warning, not flanked by PR. No assistants, no theatrics, just him. In a gray suit, no tie. His expression wasn't cold. It was measured, sharp, like he had done his homework. Valora straightened up as if she'd been caught in a lie, but wasn't ready to admit which one. "Callum," she said, stepping forward. "I didn't know you were coming." He didn't answer her. Instead, he walked directly to the head sales manager, who, to his credit, didn't faint. "I want to see the most expensive item in the store," Callum said evenly. "Now." The man blinked, nodded, and rushed away. In the corner, a woman holding her purse clutched her phone tighter. Someone whispered, "That's him." Another replied, "It's her husband." Valora's face held, but I saw the first crack, right around her eyes. The manager returned with a velvet tray, trembling slightly. On it sat the crown jewel of de la Vigne, the diamond necklace. Its centerpiece sparkled under the lights, like it had been waiting for this very moment. The entire boutique leaned in, some physically, others with breath held behind glossed lips. Callum didn't even look at it. He turned to me. "Try it on!" My heart skipped. I didn't move right away. I wasn't sure what was happening. I wasn't sure why he was doing this, until I saw Valora's hands curl around the sides of her designer clutch. She stepped forward. "This is absurd," she said, voice sharp. "That's mine. You got it for me." Callum turned to her then, fully, calmly. "I got it for the woman who understood value," he said. "Not vanity." Valora blinked like she'd been slapped. Not loudly, not violently, but precisely. He turned back to me and gently lifted the necklace from the tray. He stepped closer, pausing just long enough for me to give consent. Not with words, but with stillness. He fastened it around my neck with the kind of care you reserve for things that matter. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, wearing not just diamonds, but truth. "You always needed shine," I said softly. "I learned how to reflect." Silence. Then whispers. So many whispers. "That's her," someone said. "The sister." She didn't even raise her voice. Another voice, almost in awe. "Valora just lost her crown." The boutique's Instagram Live, accidentally still running on a tablet left near the register, was capturing every second. I didn't need to post. I didn't need to defend. I was simply present. Valora backed away slowly, like the air had shifted and she couldn't breathe in it anymore. The influencers who came with her, they found sudden interest in a display case across the room. Their laughter quieted. Their phones stayed down. No selfies now. Not in this light. I turned to the manager. "Thank you," I said, adjusting the necklace with a single touch. He nodded, his posture half a bow. I walked out of the boutique with no applause, no music. Just a quiet knowing that something had changed. She wanted luxury to validate her. I let silence do it for me. I didn't check my phone that night. I left it face down on the kitchen counter and made a cup of mint tea instead. I stood at the window while the water boiled, watching headlights glide past on the street below like slow-moving thoughts I didn't want to catch. I needed the quiet to linger, if only for a few more hours. It had taken years to reclaim my voice. I wasn't about to give it away in the comments section. But the next morning, the world knocked on my door, and it didn't wait for an invitation. My name was trending. Not for scandal, not for shame, but for stillness. Woman holds composure, while sister humiliates her in 12 millionaires boutique standoff. She stood like a verdict, not a victim. She wore dignity like it was couture. I blinked at the headlines, unsure if I was still asleep, but the emails pouring into my inbox said otherwise. Journalists, bloggers, a friend I hadn't heard from since high school. A woman from Oregon who just wanted to say, "Thank you for showing me that not fighting back doesn't mean losing." The boutique's Instagram page had gone into lockdown. The comments on Valora's most recent post, where she smiled with that necklace, falsely claiming it as a gift from her husband, had turned into a battlefield. Some people defended her, of course. Image has a long shelf life. But most saw through it now. Someone had clipped the live stream footage, where Callum walked in, where he said plainly, "I got it for the woman who understood value, not vanity." That single line had become a meme, a tweet, a TikTok trend. And Valora's face at that moment, caught mid-smirk, frozen like a statue just before it cracks, was everywhere. Luxury doesn't make you noble. Callum knew the difference. Some people wear diamonds. Some people reflect them. In 48 hours, the boutique's rating dropped from 4.9 to 2.3 stars. Influencer tags were removed. A video compilation popped up showing Valora dismissing service staff at events, giving fake cries during charity panels, and refusing to answer a question about her humble beginnings. I didn't post a thing. I didn't comment. I didn't retweet. I just sat on my couch in my quiet apartment, barefoot, sipping coffee, and reading what people were finally seeing for themselves. The truth doesn't always have to roar. Sometimes, it just has to stand still long enough to let the lie run out of breath. Later that afternoon, I went to the coffee shop near Pasadena Community College. I needed air, familiar faces, a place where nobody cared if you wore designer or not. I hadn't been there in a while, but the barista still remembered my order. Black coffee, 2 ice cubes, no cream. I was stirring in a dash of cinnamon when I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Ms. Baird?" I turned and saw a woman, mid-20s, curly hair pulled into a bun, eyes wide with recognition. "I'm Narina," she said quickly. "Narina Hodge. You probably don't remember me. I was in your creative writing class, sophomore year. You helped me get my first story published in the school paper." I blinked, then smiled. "Of course I remember you. You wrote that piece about your grandmother's quilt collection." She nodded, eyes glassy. "I saw the video. I saw everything. And I just wanted to say, I saw what they did to you. But the way you stood there, you rewrote it in real time." She paused, then added, "You taught me that stories matter. I never forgot that." My throat tightened, not from pain, from release. Sometimes the past you thought had drifted out of reach comes back, not to haunt you, but to hug you. Narina reached into her tote bag. "I work for a small publishing house now, junior editor. My boss saw your name in the news. He watched the video. He asked me if I knew you." "And?" I asked, eyebrows raised. I said, "She's the kind of voice the world forgot, but now desperately needs. And he wants to meet with you. If you're open to it. No pressure, of course." I let out a small laugh. Genuine, surprised. "You just made my entire week, Narina." She blushed. "No, you made mine. Years ago." She gave me her card and promised to email me by end of day. Then she left, as quickly as she appeared, waving over her shoulder like we'd just finished class. I sat there a long while, watching the swirl of cream in someone else's coffee, letting the noise of the cafe settle around me like a safe blanket. I hadn't asked for recognition, but maybe that's the point. The loudest echoes come when you stop trying to make a sound. That evening, I scrolled through more coverage, this time as an observer, not a target. Fashion columnists were questioning the industry's obsession with aesthetic over authenticity. A YouTube commentary channel did a full breakdown of the Baird Greaves boutique showdown and ended with, "Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't raise her voice." Refund requests hit the boutique's inbox like a storm. Sponsors quietly distanced themselves from Valora. A quote from her old interview began circulating as irony. "If I ever fall, it'll be because I tripped over my own success." I didn't celebrate. This wasn't justice in the legal sense. No subpoenas, no settlements. This was justice by witness. And I didn't share my story. I just stood in it. And somehow, that was enough for the world to see what she'd painted over. She curated an image. I lived a truth. And now, the world had chosen which to believe. The quiet that followed wasn't a peaceful one. It was the kind that hums in your ears like leftover electricity after a storm has passed. You know something has shifted, but the room looks the same, at least on the surface. 2 mornings after the boutique incident, I met Callum at his office in downtown Los Angeles. He had requested the meeting himself, said it wouldn't take long. I said I didn't need closure. He said this wasn't about closure, it was about clarity. His office was just as I remembered from years ago. Clean, minimal, intentionally cold. The kind of space where people wear restraint like armor. The legal assistant greeted me with a name I hadn't heard in weeks, Ms. Baird. But this time, it came without hesitation or side-eye. Callum met me at the glass door. No handshake, just a nod. "Thank you for coming." I followed him down the corridor to a smaller conference room where a tablet and a printed packet sat waiting. No coffee, no folder labeled "for review," just facts. "I had our legal team do a deep audit," he said, taking a seat across from me. "Everything from the company's founding to the early bridge loans. I wanted to understand where things went wrong, not emotionally, on paper." He slid the packet toward me, the edge catching against the grain of the table like it didn't want to move. Inside, my name sat bold and unmistakable. A founding guarantee letter, my signature, the date, the wire confirmation from my old bank account. I was listed as a provisional investor, part of the original financial scaffolding that helped Callum's startup stay afloat when other funding fell through. But then, a small footnote at the bottom: ownership status voided upon failure to appear for formal sign-off. Callum spoke before I could. "That sign-off meeting was scheduled while you were in Oregon with your mother. It was never rescheduled." I nodded slowly. "Valora said you didn't need me there, that you had it handled." He leaned back, a muscle twitching in his jaw. I believed her. We sat in silence. He added more softly this time. "It's legally gray, but ethically, it's damning." I closed the folder and didn't touch the tablet. I didn't need more PDFs to confirm what I'd already known in my bones for years. "I don't need you to fix it," I said. "I just needed to know I wasn't crazy." He gave me a look, half apology, half respect. "You weren't." Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, my fingers tracing the edge of a file I'd nearly thrown out last spring. It had survived 6 apartment moves, and at least 3 attempts at decluttering. Inside, it was a boutique receipt from 2 decades ago. I had bought the necklace on a rainy Tuesday when I was 23. It was my first big purchase after landing a salaried job. The saleswoman wrapped it like it was meant for someone else, someone fancier, but I'd worn it out of the store, proud and certain that one day I'd give it to someone who would never forget its meaning. I stared at the faded ink, my own signature at the bottom, and the address on the line above it. My old apartment in Silver Lake. Not Valora's. Mine. That necklace had never been hers. Not by price, not by story. Now I understood why she had erased the engraving on the back. For my daughters, MM. It hadn't matched the fiction she was selling. I scanned the receipt, uploaded it along with the founding doc into a folder I labeled, "Ownership is more than paper." I wrote one sentence on a Post-it and stuck it to my desk lamp. "You don't win truth, you verify it." The next morning, I emailed everything, not to Malis this time, to a short list of journalists, lawyers, industry contacts who'd once sung Valora's praises. I didn't write a manifesto, I didn't rant, I just sent documents, let them speak. While the emails flew off silently, something else happened in the background. Valora's PR inbox lit up like Christmas in reverse. Anonymous tips flooded the boutique's board. The boutique's general counsel received a memo from a retail ethics watchdog questioning the legitimacy of Valora's brand origin stories. And while I made breakfast in my small Pasadena kitchen, scrambled eggs, toast, nothing fancy, news trickled into the public. First, one of her sponsors announced they were reevaluating their collaboration. Then a podcast episode aired, breaking down the inconsistencies in her business timeline, the redacted documents in archived press kits. Fashion bloggers began stitching together screenshots and timelines like detectives with digital yarn. She had built her empire on being the woman who rose from nothing. The world was now learning how many hands she'd stepped on while climbing. And I hadn't said a word. I didn't have to. She crafted her image like silk, smooth, expensive, elegant. But I held facts like glass, fragile maybe, but they reflected everything. And now, finally, they were being seen. She built her success on forgetfulness. I kept receipts. Callum's office hadn't changed much. Neither had he. Always calm, always calculated. But that morning, he looked like someone who'd finally decided to stop pretending he couldn't see the fire across the street. The room was quiet when I walked in, sunlight bleeding through the blinds, just enough to make everything feel realer than I wanted. He didn't stand to greet me, just motioned to the seat across from him, like we were equals in a matter neither of us fully controlled. "I started looking into things after our last meeting," he said, not wasting a breath. "Honestly, I started before that, months ago." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I didn't tell you then because I wasn't sure what I'd find, and because I wasn't ready to admit it to myself." There was a pause, and in it, I could hear the weight of what came next. Callum turned his screen toward me and tapped the keyboard. "Here," he said. "Financials, emails, archive pulls from the PR team. Valora's name is everywhere, but yours, scrubbed, even from places where you were quoted." My throat tightened. "She had her name inserted into original pitch decks you helped write, removed yours from press kits, blog posts, even the podcast episode you guest spoke on back in 2018. I blinked. "The one on first-gen entrepreneurs?" He nodded. "They re-released it 2 years later under her voice only. Edited out your segment entirely." I sat back. There it was. Not a metaphor, not a hunch. Just fact. He clicked again. "And then there's this. Private account transfers from the boutique's marketing budget to a shell firm. She listed them as consultant payments. No consultant exists." I felt nothing. Not even surprise. Just confirmation. "She didn't lose her way," I said. "She never wanted to share the map." Callum rubbed his jaw. "I stayed quiet longer than I should have. I wanted to believe she was just ambitious." "No," I said. "She was deliberate." On the table between us sat my silence. Years of it. Neatly folded. He gave me a number, a quiet settlement figure. I declined. I didn't need hush money. I had my own voice now. As I left the office, my phone buzzed. A call from Milas. I answered, and her voice came through steady, clear, like someone who had waited long enough. "You still want me to publish the story?" I paused at the elevator, pressed the button, watched it light up. "Yes," I said. "Use the documents, but leave my name out of the headline." "Understood," she said. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. A voicemail draft blinked at me from my phone, one I'd written for Valora but never sent. It started with, "I miss the way we were," and ended with too many ellipses to be honest. I deleted it. That version of her, the one I missed, only ever lived in my head. And even in memory, she demanded center stage. I clicked open a new file and began writing again. Not for publishing, not for public read, just for me. A simple line repeated itself in my head. She didn't lose me, she lost access. 2 days later, I was invited to speak at a Women in Publishing event at a local nonprofit library. Nothing big. A folded chair on a community center stage. I wore jeans, a soft sweater, and the smallest pair of earrings I owned. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to be honest. My speech wasn't long. I talked about women who write but are never credited, women who edit behind the scenes, women who stay in drafts and get erased in the final version. I said, "You're not invisible. They just don't know how to look at you without guilt." The room clapped, small but heartfelt, And as I stepped down, I saw her, Valora, alone. No glam squad, no camera crew, just her, in a pale coat too tight across the shoulders, standing by the exit like she'd wandered into the wrong story. I didn't approach her. She did. "I never expected you to win," she said quietly. "I didn't," I replied. "I just stopped playing your game." She opened her mouth like she might explain, might apologize. I held up a hand, not with anger, but with finality. "This isn't anger," I said. "It's absence. I no longer orbit your gravity." She looked like someone who couldn't find her script. I walked past her. The door opened with a squeak and shut without echo. She didn't lose me to bitterness. She lost me to peace. The next morning, I woke early without an alarm. The house was still, the kind of still that doesn't demand your attention. It offers it. Light slipped gently through the sheer curtains of my office, casting long stripes across the desk, where my tea sat cooling beside a small stack of mail. Among the envelopes, I found a handwritten note folded carefully between a publishing catalog and a flyer from the local co-op. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting wasn't. Narina's. Inside, a single page. Ink slightly smudged, like she'd written it quickly but meant every word. "Thank you for reminding me that dignity doesn't shout, it just outlasts the noise." I read it twice, then folded it again and placed it in the box I kept in the closet labeled kept, not shared. That box had grown over the years, not just in size, but in weight. It held words that hadn't needed to go viral, gestures that hadn't needed an audience. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because I was finally at peace. The kind that doesn't knock you over, the kind that holds your shoulders straight and lets you breathe deeper. Later that week, I received a quiet email from the City Museum. They were putting together a small exhibit titled "Women and Legacy: What We Carry Forward." A curator had come across my essay on ethical authorship and wanted to feature a few of my personal artifacts, if I was willing. I didn't ask who tipped them off. I had a guess. The day I visited the exhibit, it was already open to the public. No ribbon cutting, no gala. Just a few careful displays lining a modest room with muted lighting and warm-toned walls. In one glass case sat my first annotated manuscript, margins full of second thoughts and stubborn confidence. Beside it, the boutique receipt I had once found tucked between old bank statements. My name, still faded but legible, alongside the necklace listing. And then, in the center, the necklace itself. It didn't glitter under the spotlight. It didn't command attention. It rested, quiet, resolute. A small plaque underneath read, "Gifted, erased, reclaimed." There was no mention of Valora, no timeline of scandal, just facts, just a corrected ledger of what mattered. I stood there for a while, not looking at the necklace, but at the faces of the people reading the plaque. A teenager in a denim jacket tilted her head and whispered to her friend, "I like that. Not everything has to be loud to be strong." I smiled. I wasn't proud because it hurt to get here. I was proud because I didn't take shortcuts, because even when I was written out, I never stopped remembering where I'd been. A few days later, I found myself at the stone bench on the hill overlooking Pasadena. It was where my mother used to sit after walks, sip her coffee, and talk to the sky like it was an old friend. I hadn't been back in years. In my hand, I held a plain envelope. No address, no stamp, just her name written across the front in my own steady handwriting. Inside, one line. "You needed that necklace to feel worth." I never did. I left it under the bench, pressed between the pages of a book we both used to love, its cover sun-bleached, its spine softened with time. Then I walked away. Not with victory, with oxygen, with space that no longer had to hold the weight of her disappointment or my longing for something that never truly existed. On the way home, I passed by a bookstore I hadn't noticed before. A sign in the window read, "Local Voices Matter." Something about the phrase felt like permission. maybe even invitation. When I got back, I sat down at my desk, opened a new document, and began typing. Not about Velora, not about the boutique, just beginnings. The kind that don't require revenge or spotlight, the kind that stretch forward instead of circling back. Family can break you. Family can heal you. Family can also free you. Sometimes the same people do all three. She kept the spotlight, I kept the story, and now both are where they belong.